one of the things I've got to do is decide how I'm going to make the body work, and you can see there's different ways of doing it. If I've been looking at aircraft rear fuselages, you see you have basically rings, and then you have panels, and then you have lengthways strips, and then you have panels riveted on. And if we look at older aircraft like that, flush rivets, and there's a good picture, gives you the idea. And again there. So you can see the panels are just almost flat aluminium run down in strips and riveted on, and then you do another one and another one. So there isn't that much metal shaping in terms of compound curves. You're just bending it, which may be why they built them like that, because it was wartime and they had to use, well, I suppose the less skilled people, if possible. So you have millions of quite small panels on a frame like that. So I could build it like that and just have lots of flush rivets, and then I wouldn't have to make compound curves with an English wheel or anything like that. The problem is, of course, though, that the framework of it is a lot more complicated to produce. You see some of this almost looks a bit crude here. It's a fuselage of an aircraft while being restored. No, that's the rough, yeah, it's the rough idea. Loads of rivets, loads and loads of rivets basically. Yeah, I mean here they overlap the panels, put a step in this panel and then rivet it through. You can see the step there as well. So it was clear to me, I had two choices. I was either going to build this like a Spitfire fuselage, small panels of aluminium with metal hoops and stringers, or are they longerons? Can't remember the difference. And then relatively small shape panels riveted on, and you'd have millions of flush rivets. Now, and the other way was to use larger panels, seam welded. So the key to all this is, can I seam weld aluminium panels or not? So basically I took the plunge. I've read all the books, watched all the videos. Here's some scraps of aluminium, 2mm thick, just on a steel plate. So what did I do? Well, first of all I scrubbed them with a stainless steel brush, then I cleaned the edges with acetone. Then, critical step, waited for the acetone fumes to disappear because they can be explosive. I have a friend who managed to burn his eyelids off with a flash burn using acetone in that way, and he was probably lucky to get away with just that. And then on the end of my welder here, I used about a 6mm stick out for the tip. I ground the tip so it's reasonably pointed. Some people put a tiny blunt on the end of that. I use what's called a 5 cup, which gives you a slightly more concentrated flow of gas, and allegedly will give you a narrower weld. Started at 70 amps, about 30 amps per millimetre, they reckon, as a starting point. It started at 70 amps. It melted the metal, but it didn't melt my filler rod. I had a blob of sort of half melted goo hanging off the end of my filler rod. So I cranked it up to 90 amps, which seemed about right. Did a reasonable weld all the way along here. Got a bit too hot at the end here, it was in danger of burning through, so I flicked it back. I've got a pedal on order from the company that made my welder, because you need to basically back off the current as you get near the end. This is a well-known phenomenon. So I didn't burn all the way through, I kind of saved it, but it's not pretty, and you probably smooth that all down, it would look fine. But anyway, so that was my first attempt. With aluminium welding, you can use a MIG welder and things like that, but really you use an AC current, which basically means I had it set to 30%, 30 to 35% seems to be recommended. What does that mean? It means the current's flowing that way 70% of the time, so it's like zapping heat into the metal. 30% of the time it's flowing backwards this way, and what that does is it kind of blows the oxide layer off the aluminium, because in contact with air, aluminium forms an oxide layer immediately, which is what protects it. So we've scrubbed it with the wire brush, stainless brush, cleaned it with acetone, and even in that small time it can start forming. So basically you have 30% of the time is like a cleaning cycle. It blasts crud off the surface so that when it changes direction, comes back down, it produces a heating, melting effect, and it's AC. So the current is going like this, but it's 70% of the time it's that way, 30% of the time it's that way. And the frequency then, I had it at about 90 Hertz. Looking at the videos, the recommendation is anywhere between about 80 Hertz and about 150. Apparently the higher the Hertz rate, the narrower your weld gets. I haven't tried that yet, but I will do. Interestingly, I haven't got any, I mean these are just two knackered bits of aluminium, but there's no obvious welding or distortion of the panels, which I would expect to see if I was welding two sheets of steel. So I don't know if I just got lucky or what, but there you go. So not too bad. So the key point here, as this is my first ever attempt at doing this, it's good enough once I've cleaned that all down to form an almost invisible seam. So that means I'm going to go down the larger panels welded together route, not the building a Spitfire kind of route. So that influences what I do next. So you can see the other thing I've done now is space these. These are all 1 foot apart, minus the thickness of the wood. So they're all locked into position now with these little spacers, which don't look pretty, but they're not meant to look pretty, they're meant to do a job. So you can see there. So the next thing to do is construct a model of the nose and construct some sort of outline what the tail might look like in plywood sheets, and then go for there. I may cut little notches out here and put long stringers, thin strips of wood just bent to shape, which would just give you the curve that you need, because obviously the aluminium panels that I will attempt to make are going to have to be test fitted onto this model. And you think, well, why have you built it on the car? Well, one is it saves a huge amount of space compared to building a separate wooden model, because you've still got to store your car somewhere, your frame. And secondly, if it fits this woodwork, if you like, then it's going to fit the car. It's got to, because it's being built on the car. So it might seem an odd way to do it. I haven't really seen it done like this in any books, but to me I don't see what the problem is really. Then I'll flip the whole chassis over and do the underside in a similar manner. But obviously you won't see that so much. And also it'll allow me to get all the weirdness around the cockpit area, you know, shaped to fit as well. The other thing I've done is to get one of these. This is actually the original steering link, which would have been on this. So you see that would go there, like that. So if I find that this is perilously close to the actual tip of the nose of my car, I may put a kink into that so it's more that shape, and I may go for the shorter arm as well. But really I'm just going to have to kind of experiment a bit, see what works. I've spent a lot of time getting the position of this one right. So if we run a straight rod, this is straight from that point to that point, and look at the gap there, it's the same all the way around. Okay. I don't want my nose cone to be wonky or off to one side, it just wouldn't look right, would it? Right, so will the steering fit inside the nose cone? So how's that going to look? Well, it's going to sort of come down there, isn't it? The tip of the nose will probably be about here. Something like that. Point about there. So might work after all. I was worried it wouldn't fit. And then the other thing is, have I made any major cock-ups with my metalwork? So I mean, if we look down the woodwork, is any of the metal, apart from the roll cage, sticking out where it shouldn't? Particularly sort of this structure here. See? It fits with literally, well, not even a millimetre to spare. That's assuming this panel is straight. In fact, would have a slight curve on it outwards. Literally a couple of mil there. This side. Oh, look at that for repeatability. Yeah, this side's pretty much the same. But it just fits. In theory, I shouldn't need to modify anything, should I? So that was the bit to worry about. Anything else sticking out? This isn't sticking out. Frame rails aren't sticking out. Just go around, check all the way. What about around here? Again, we're well within the bodywork. Here, not quite. There'll have to be a little notch out for my aluminium bodywork there. But that's kind of roughly as I planned it. Yeah, so not bad, not bad. Well, you can see with this ring here, little cut out there, but that's reasonably neat. Also, you'll notice it tucks in. This one tucks in there. See there's a gap. Right, and it's important that it's the same both sides, which it is pretty much, and on top. There's a gap. And that's because for the tail it just looks nicer. Instead of it coming round to a point, it kind of comes round and then tucks in a little and then goes out a bit longer. Those belly tanks just look slightly nicer. So I'm not doing it to kind of a great extent, but just it'll come around and it just tuck in a little and then come out like that. This is my original cardboard plan. So the circle I've got so far is that one. So you can see, I don't know if you can see it, sort of, it's fat here, curves in, and it kinks in slightly here, and then rounds to a point. So it's from here on I'm going to just make in wood from now on and fix it to the back end. We've got a tail on it now. And it may even just miss these, because I was thinking it was going to foul it, but may well just miss. I've got a cup holder there. Now I've mocked up the nose. I might redo this. I'll probably end up doing this several times, but it just gives me an idea. It's close. This has a 3-inch travel each way, so even if I keep this arm on, it's going to just, well, it'll come around to about here, be within the confines of the nose, because I didn't think it would. So I can either put the shorter arm here, or even with it left as it is, it will still fit within the nose. I mean, it might look a bit weird coming out the side of the nose, but all these cars are kind of, I don't know, even in the day they were kind of improvised somewhat. Anyway, in terms of packaging, everything seems to fit, which I'm really pleased about. So the next job is to go to the DIY store again and buy some long strips of wood, or aluminium strip, I'm not sure yet, and run lots of them lengthways. Aluminium could be better if I'm welding to it. I don't know yet, I have to think about that. And then also I'm going to glue little blocks sticking out on all of these level with this top edge, because that's where the perimeter of the upper half of the shell will line up with. I've just been to the DIY store and got some timber and some 8-foot long strips of steel, and I'm going to use these, I think, to help form the shape lengthways, because you can bend them to shape but they're rigid enough to stay put once you've done that. Now they're not quite long enough, so I'm going to have to weld about another 3 feet to the end of these to get where I want to be. So that's the next step. There's the weld. I welded 2 more down here for the sides. So now the thing is to put the curve into it, including a little slight negative curve here, and cut the slots and then drill holes, and I'll screw it down into the wood. So by clamping it there, I can then follow it down the whole way to here. Okay, and then I can mark where I need where I need to cut the little slots so it's flush with the wood. Well, although this is a bit time consuming and fiddly, I think this is probably a good idea. Just helps a lot in getting the shape right. Need to widen that notch a bit there. It's a bit this way, but you get the idea. I think that'll be really helpful when I come to making the panels. I've got to do the same down the sides, each side as well. Well, I think that's turned out quite well actually. It really kind of shows the curve you need to get. So just got 2 more to go, 1 each side. And that's come out pretty well. So that gives me an edge to work to. So basically the bottom edge of this rail is where the seam will be all the way around. And looking at it, what I should probably do is keep this rail, weld spaces in here all the way, because that rail is in exactly the right place. And then when the body goes on, it'll lock down, and this will just kind of like support it. So those 2 on the side I might keep, even when the woodwork's gone. And I'm just thinking about an exhaust, because you know, some people bring them out through here, or you can bring them out down here, tucking back. You're not supposed to have them going downwards on salt, because it messes up the salt. I'm sure they don't mind with sand, but I'm just thinking, wouldn't it'd be quite cool, wouldn't it, if the exhaust, if you had two pipes each side, one here coming along here, and then when it gets to here there's a huge like cutaway, so it's flush with the aluminium, but it just opens out into a big oval here, and then the same, it'd come come there, along there, through this area, and then again a big cutaway in the tail, and that'll be just something kind of a bit different to what most people do. Because it'd be quite nice to have like a completely streamlined look to it without lots of things sticking out. Anyway, there's nothing for it. I've put it off long enough. I've actually got to start to order some aluminium, and this will be the bulkhead. This will be a steel bulkhead here, which won't be that shape because it'll come up like that because of the fairing. So if I, as my first panel, make a panel that goes all the way like that, so that's basically a rolled panel with a slight bulge in the middle. So that's actually one of the easier ones to do, I would have thought. And also when I weld the seam here, you won't see that weld because actually it'd probably be cut out ultimately, because again the fairing will come over here. So it's probably a reasonable place to start, because I've got an English wheel kit which I need to assemble.